This Memorial Day, Real America's Voice presents a powerful television event, America Remembers, hosted by Beau Davidson.
Freedom is directly possible because of those who came before us.
Featuring Gold Star mother, Karen Vaughn.
The military ended up at my front door, but I already knew.
Wounded Navy SEAL Jason Redmond.
Doctors say it's a miracle I survived.
TAPS founder Bonnie Carroll.
You are not alone. There is a community.
And former Navy SEAL Chris Wiley.
Nobody here goes to bed at night worrying there'll be enemy troops in our streets.
A moving look at sacrifice, freedom, and the heroes who gave everything for America.
Your mind literally just stops functioning.
America Remembers starts right now, only on Real America's Voice.
Welcome to America Remembers, a Memorial Day special for Real America's Voice. Today, America remembers. We remember the honor, the sacrifice, the duty, the glory, the honor, the significance, the impact of 250 years of fighting for this great country of ours. Memorial Day is a time to reflect, to ponder, to remember those who came before us and made this noble experiment possible. I think this has particular significance this year as we celebrate America's 250th birthday. We recently saw Rededicate 250, an incredible time of worship and prayer on the National Mall, where Americans rededicated this nation to God, to noble values and blessings. And very soon we will witness the actual 250th birthday on our Independence Day, July 4th. But before July 4th is always Memorial Day, that last Monday in May, when we honor those who served and died in pursuit of that freedom that this country was founded upon. While many will take today to enjoy things that you would ordinarily not be able to do during the week, maybe that's a barbecue, a picnic, a park, getting out on the river, the lake, or a beach, those are all great things and should be done because that freedom is directly possible because of those who came before us. Those names etched in granite at Arlington National Cemetery, those state names on the World War II Memorial, the vast sea of names on the Vietnam Memorial, and so many other ways that we commemorate the fallen. My personal challenge this Memorial Day was to use my artistry to put into music and words what I feel Memorial Day is all about. And I have to admit, it wasn't easy. But then I thought about the dignified transfer of the soldiers who came home in caskets to Dover, Delaware recently. I had never covered a dignified transfer before on air, and as I was able to tell a little bit about each soldier and their background. Perhaps the most devastating was Sergeant Declan Cody, just 20 years old, a guy who took great pride in serving his country. He was an Eagle Scout, and his community described him as someone who was a friend, a son, a servant. So I took Sergeant Cody as kind of my inspirational springboard. And over the course of this special, you will hear bits and pieces of the song I've been working on called We Remember. I thought of Sergeant Cody and the other brave soldiers who perished in Operation Epic Fury because it's fresh in our minds. We haven't seen combat like this in quite some time. So when the bodies come home, it hits different. It reminds us of the cost of freedom, and it's never just one loss. Each soldier has a unique story, a unique background, a different path to service. It is up to us to honor their memory and legacy. Over the next hour, you will hear from Gold Star moms, Navy SEALs, and people who have made it their mission to ensure grieving military families have support as America remembers this Memorial Day. We'll be right back.
A name on the wall among thousands of others, etched into granite with so many brothers, reminding us the cost is never free. Hill after hill of tiny white stones, each one the story of sweat, blood, and bones. An angel above looking down on his family. 'Cause we remember every soul and every grave. We remember every folded flag today. We can't forget the sacrifice. We won't forget who paid the price. And we know they didn't die in vain. 'Cause we remember.
Welcome back. Perhaps no one understands the meaning of Memorial Day better than someone who has lost a family member who served in the military. That loss is even greater if that loss is your own son. Karen Vaughn lost her son, U.S. Navy SEAL Chief Aaron Vaughn of SEAL Team 6 in Afghanistan when a chopper carrying 30 Americans into battle was shot down, killing all on board. The tragedy will live in military history as the single largest one-day loss of life in the entire 20-year war on terror and the single largest loss of life in the history of naval special warfare. Karen, thank you so much for being here today. I want to start off just by honoring Aaron's life. And if you would, tell us a history of how Aaron got into the military.
Thank you so much for that, Beau. It's wonderful to be here with you. So Aaron, from the time he was a young boy, probably about 8 years old, he would tell anyone who would listen that he was going to be a Navy SEAL when he grew up. I didn't even really know what that was at the time, but he had this dream. He kept forging through every single obstacle that hit his way, and people would laugh about it and say, you can't do it. He didn't have the body type for it. He was 6'4" and weighed about 140 pounds soaking wet when he was 16, so he didn't look like the person who could do that. He ended up being a very good football player, and just before the first game of his senior year, he blew out the anterior cruciate ligament in his left knee. Thought his dream was over, but we went and had surgery, fixed it. This is an important story, so forgive me for just taking a second to tell you this. Had it fixed, had a new ACL put in. He rehabbed so hard that, by the time he graduated, scouts were already looking at him to possibly pick him up for a smaller school college football team. And then he was playing a pickup game of basketball with some friends just before he graduated, and he blew his knee out again. This time when the surgeons went in, they said, there's absolutely nothing I can do to fix your knee. You're going to spend the rest of your life somewhat handicapped, and you will never be able to do anything physical again without the use of a special brace. So when Aaron woke up from that anesthetic fog, he literally thought life was over. His whole life had been goaled toward doing this one thing, and now he realized he wasn't going to do it. But then came 9/11. And after 9/11, Aaron, just like everybody else in this nation, was shook, didn't know how to respond. He came home on his 21st birthday a few months later, and he sat down across the dinner table from his father and I, and he said, I stopped by the Navy recruiter's office on my way home from work, and I joined the SEAL Challenge program. And we couldn't believe it. His father said, what about your knee? And he said, Dad, I've always known this is what God was calling me to do. It's what I was created for, and I'm going to do it. And you know the rest of the story. He not only made it, his name is on the wall at Coronado Island. Of the few men in history who completed every evolution required of them the first time they tried it. It's called the first time, every time wall. And as you know, he made it all the way into SEAL Team 6, and no one ever knew about the knee, or they wouldn't have let him proceed. So it's a God story. It's something he was created to do. And it's something that, he got to live out. He never spent a day of his life not being grateful that he got to do this.
Well, Karen, I'm so glad you told that story. It gives us perspective, and what an incredible story of passion and purpose and what he was able to do in spite of the odds. I think it's an incredible story, so thank you for telling us that. Karen, what did Memorial Day mean to you before Aaron died in that tragic chopper incident? I'd like for you to talk about how you felt about Memorial Day before it and then after Aaron's passing.
This is why I never get upset with people about the way they take on Memorial Day, because I was just like you. Even while Aaron was serving, it was barbecues, it was a long weekend, it was big sales, and that's the way I entered Memorial Day. I was going to be off work on Monday, and of course, after August 6, 2011, all of that shifted. And I remember the first Memorial Day that we spent in May of 2012, I felt like my heart would break for how much I had taken for granted what that day meant. And the day literally demolished us as a family to just start to internalize what Memorial Day meant. And I've made it a pretty big mission of mine to start making people focus on, we honor veterans all year long. It's a great thing to do any time of the day, but there is one day that we stop and remember those who actually gave their lives so that we could live in this amazing United States of America under the umbrella of freedom. And that's what Memorial Day is about.
That's so true. And I know your perspective is entirely different. As a songwriter, I've never served in the military. My father, my grandfather did, but I've tried my best to honor American sacrifice in my own artistic way. And recently, Karen, I began writing a song called We Remember. And the first lyric that came to my mind was a knock on the door when you're not expecting, uniformed men with somber expression telling you news you don't want to hear. This is typically military protocol when there's a loss of life and alerting the family. If you can and you wouldn't mind sharing, how did you learn of Aaron's death?
Yeah, so his father, my husband Billy, was away from home on that morning, and he called me very early and he said, Karen, I have something I don't want to tell you, but I need to. And he went on to explain that he had been hearing news reports all morning that a helicopter had been shot down and that everybody on board was dead. And he said the more they started giving details about the area where they were working, the more it sounded like it could have been Aaron's team. And I said, honey, what can I do? And so I started calling Aaron's friends to see if they had any information. Nobody answered. I later realized why. No one knew what to tell me. I called his wife, who was staying with her parents in Northern Virginia, because they had just had their second child. Chamberlain was only 9 weeks old that morning. And she was up there with her parents. They were helping her. And so I called her parents' house and told them what was going on and said, is Kimberly up yet? And they said, no. And I said, well, don't wake her up till I know more. So we had 2 or 3 phone calls back and forth between me and her father or mother. And then the last time that I called, her father answered the phone and he said, Karen, it's not good. And I said, oh, I know, assuming that he was going to say, it sounds like it could have been Aaron's helicopter and his team, but I could never have prepared myself for what came out of his mouth. He said, listen to me, Aaron was on the helicopter and there were no survivors. And in that moment, your mind literally just stops functioning. You don't know how to process something like that. It actually takes several years to believe it's true. You continue wanting to believe it's not. You can't imagine it, never expected it. Aaron was a Navy SEAL. He was part of SEAL Team 6. He was supposed to always be on the defensive. He wasn't supposed to get killed. He was supposed to just kill the bad guys, right? And so it never crossed my mind. We had a big family reunion planned that November, and we were going to meet back in Tennessee on the farm where we raised him and have a big celebration and spend Thanksgiving together. And that's all that was on my mind. I couldn't have fathomed that message was coming to me. And then, of course, a couple hours later, the military ended up at my front door, but I already knew. And that's the way that day went. I will remember one thing. I will tell you one thing I remember is my yard began being flooded with cars, people coming because as word was spreading, they were coming to, spend time with us. And I remember asking somebody, please go lower that flag in my front yard to half mast, because people are going to, when you drive by a yard on a Saturday morning and it's full of cars like that, and you see people walking in with a somber attitude, you kind of know something happened in that family. And I said, I don't want them to just think somebody died. I want them to know someone died for them. So please go lower the flag. And that's the way that morning went. It was the most ungodly moment of my life.
I remember last year when I visited South Florida National Cemetery and even Arlington in years past, that the volume of small white tombstones is vast and as far as the eye can see. But in this vastness is a specific soldier with a specific story. So when we ponder Memorial Day, what is it that we Americans should consider in terms of the individuality as well as the totality of the sacrifice?
You may be asking the best questions I've ever been asked, Beau. This is actually part of the speech I'm delivering on Memorial Day. Look, we have tended to see these people as units and troops, the U.S. Army, the U.S. Navy, these great big grand ensembles of people. And we very rarely, and then we break it down, we've got brigades and troops and teams and units, right? But never the person. And what I do want people to know is that every single name on every single stone in the cemeteries across this nation, not only at Arlington, they represent a name, they represent a story, they represent a family who lost somebody that they literally never thought, they never dreamed they could live without. Most Gold Star families will tell you the same thing. There's days that you feel like you would rather be dead than continue living, not because you don't love and appreciate everything that's still around you, but because you can't imagine spending the rest of your life under that weight of grief. So look at their names, say their names, teach your children their names. One of my favorite things I ever see is when people send me pictures of Aaron's grave because they've taken their children there to tell them his story. So take your children. If you can't get to Arlington, go to a local veteran cemetery and just look up somebody's story, Google it, and teach your children about him, because they had a real big life and that mattered. And they didn't die. They weren't killed. They gave their life for you.
Yeah, it's great that you say that, Karen, because see, I wasn't even aware that Florida National Cemetery was even a thing. It's basically a mini Arlington. So I was glad I had the opportunity to visit that here in my home state. Well, I know that you've started Operation 300. So tell me about that and how folks can connect with that initiative.
Yeah, so after Aaron's death, he left behind, as I said, two small babies. Reagan, who was not quite two, and Chamberlain, who, as I said, was 9 weeks old. His widow continued asking the same question over and over again: who's going to teach my children the things Aaron would have taught them if he were still here? And it spurred an idea in us, and we began growing it, and that was to build Operation 300. Operation, because that's what SEALs do. They don't do missions, they do operations. And then 300 in honor of the 300 Spartans. And that whole story. And Aaron had Molon-Levay tattooed on his forearm. So it was one of his favorite historical moments. And so what we do is we bring children in from all over the nation for a long extended weekend, and we pair them up with a father-age male mentor, and we let them do things they might have done with their father if he were still alive. They shoot guns, they do archery, they go deep sea fishing, they have wrestled alligators, they've flown planes, it's just, if we always say that if they go home and their clothes are still worth wearing, we didn't do a good job, because we want them to be ruined by the time they're done. And so we're in our 11th or 12th year now of Operation 300. It's become a massive national nonprofit that is just growing and bursting at the seams. And just recently, we also took on caring for the families of fallen law enforcement agents. So we're very proud of that. And go look it up. It's just op300, op300.org.
Wonderful. Well, Karen, I'm just so glad that we got to do this today, because you've been inspirational, motivational. You've honored Aaron's legacy in a way that I don't think anybody else could have done in such a succinct and amazing way, and also given us a perspective on the totality of why we remember this day. So thank you so much for taking the time, reflecting upon Aaron, and making this Memorial Day truly a day to remember.
Thank you very much.
And I want our audience to remember Aaron Vaughn today. Whatever you were doing, think of him, think of Karen, think of the family, and we'll be right back with more.
A knock on the door when you're not expecting, a uniformed man, a somber expression, telling you news that you don't want to hear. He was serving his country, just 20 years old, loved being a soldier, courageous and bold, a son, a friend, a servant, loved by his peers. An Eagle Scout found his wings. With the Eagles now he sings.
Welcome back. My next guest is wounded warrior and retired Navy SEAL Jason Redman, a New York Times best-selling author, speaker, entrepreneur, and coach. Jason served 21 years with the SEAL teams deploying to South America, Europe, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Severely wounded in 2007, Jason now teaches how his overcome mindset helped him rise above a leadership failure, devastating enemy ambush, life-changing injuries, and even a debilitating business crisis. Jason's incredible story, positive message, and vibrant energy make him a highly demanded speaker and coach both nationally and internationally. Jason, welcome to America Remembers.
Beau, honored to be on with you. Thank you.
The honor is all mine and our audience that's watching today. You know, Jason, as a Navy SEAL with 21 years of experience, and especially, I would say, as a wounded warrior, how do you process a day like Memorial Day? Is it just kind of reflect upon it and what it means to you and the significance and impact of Memorial Day?
Yeah, I mean, I won't lie, it's a heavy day. It's a day that fills me with a lot of gratitude. Obviously coming very close. I mean, shot, I was hit 8 times in engagement, between my body and body armor, including a machine gun round to the face. Doctors say it's a miracle I survived. I owe my life to my teammates. I owe my life to the Air Force AC-130 gunship that brought in that fire mission. I really shouldn't be here, and I have a lot of teammates who are not here. So that gives me a lot of perspective, and it gives me gratitude for still being here. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I want to do for our other Americans, to make sure they understand what it costs to live in this country. The freedom and the opportunities we have came at a tremendous price. And there's a lot of amazing, amazing Americans who were willing to lay down their lives to enable that freedom and sacrifice. And that is what Memorial Day is all about.
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. Jason, I have a kind of a unique perspective on the fallen because I've been present for a number of ceremonies in which a soldier's Purple Heart might have been lost or stolen somehow. And once they locate them, those medals are rightly returned to the family as a piece of that soldier's legacy and story. Some were even for soldiers who perished on D-Day. So I've had this kind of unique experience of being part of these ceremonies where the medals come home.